How you doing, guys? Welcome back to a new video, and in today's video we're going to talk about sound design. More specifically, why you use sound design in the first place, where you can get your sounds from, and how you can use sound design to increase your production value. So for me, over the past couple of years, it's definitely been something that I've paid more and more attention to, and I really think that it can take your video to the next level. So when I first started off making videos, it was the visuals that I was mainly concentrating on. I didn't even think about putting sounds in, sound design, how it can enhance my films. I generally just had a music track with visuals playing over the top, which I think a lot of starter people do when they first start making videos. But now, over the last couple of years, I've got to the stage where I don't think I could ever put out a video without having some sort of sound design in it, because I think it just really plays a massive part in immersing the viewer into the actual video. So for example, if we look at this last video that I made from the Philippines and take a look at the beginning 30 or 40 seconds without sound design and then with, I think you can see that there's quite a significant difference there. So here is how the video would have looked if there was no external sounds added at all. And this is how it is with all the sound layers turned on. So as you can see, with the sound effects turned on, it just makes you feel like you're more immersed into the video and into the surroundings. And especially for a video such as this, where there's no voiceover or there's no dialogue in particular, having these sound effects, again, it just makes it feel like it's more of a kind of mini film rather than an actual like just video with, you know, video visuals with just some music playing in the background, which is what I did for a long time. And obviously I wish I would have sort of discovered how sound design can make your video so much better sooner. But anyway, I'm into it now and I'm really enjoying it, and it does take a little bit of time, but I do really think it's worth it. So where can you get these external sound effects from? I think the most obvious place is just to be able to record while you're there, while you're out shooting. Just record as much as you can, and those are probably going to give you the truest and realest sound effects, but it's not always possible. So if you can, while you're out, say you're doing a travel film like this, have something with you like a Video Mic Pro or some kind of microphone that you have on top of your camera. That's going to get you decent quality sounding audio while you're actually there shooting and actually immersed in the action. Barring that, if you can't do it for whatever reason, there might be places that just sort of don't allow you to have microphones on top of your cameras, or you might just not have one with you, or you might not want to have one, or you just might want to feel like you're being a bit more discreet, which is sometimes how I want to feel like. If sometimes when I have a big microphone on top of my camera, I don't feel like I'm being as discreet as if I just have my mirrorless camera with me in my hand. So if you do feel like that, at least make sure your levels are set in camera and that you are recording some sort of sound inside your camera as well, because even that, you can find getting it back into your editing, that you could actually use some of the audio that you have recorded. And along with that, if you can, try to get some of these sort of little Ryko sticky mini dead cat wind noise muffler things that you can just put. I'm not exactly sure of the name, but I'll put a link up, put a link down in the description of where you can get them. And yeah, you just basically want to put these on top of your actual microphone on the camera itself, and that will at least help to cut down some of the wind noise that you can get, especially when you're outside in the open air. So secondly, you can record Foley sounds, which is basically sound that you record sort of within a studio environment or within an enclosed environment, just having your microphone set up and reenacting the kind of sounds that you see when you're playing through your video. So for example, if you've got someone out in a field and you want to try to incorporate some footsteps into your video, you might not actually be able to go out and re-record those footsteps again. So you could actually just do that in Foley, just bring it back into a sort of studio environment and try to reenact those footstep sounds with the actual movement and speed of how quickly the footsteps are going and on this particular surface as well. And that is quite often actually what happens in films, in actual films, when you're recording Foley sounds. That's what they actually do. And for a lot of scenarios that can be quite useful, but it can also be quite time consuming. So I would say the most time efficient and probably the most popular way to do it is to just go online and try to search for as many sound effects as you can as possible. That's what I do, and that's what I did in particular in this Philippines video. I am a member of Epidemic Sound, and they have an amazing sound effects library with one that they've actually built on and improved, which is really great. So as well as having music, they actually have sound effects as well, which is awesome. It's not only the sound effects they have, but they have sort of variations of a lot of sound effects. So you can kind of really dial in and find the exact thing that works for you. For example, like a car door closing, they'll have many different types of that. Waterfalls, they have many different types of waterfall sounds. Just having that variety can really allow you to zero in and find the exact sort of sound that you need. There are also other websites out there like freesound.org. I think it's quite a popular one, and that's obviously got all free sounds, but there is not as good variety, I would say, on there than you get an Epidemic Sound. But obviously with it being free, free is free, so give that a go first up if you want. But I would say if you want to sort of dive straight in and get good quality sound straight up and not have to mess around and search for ages on freesound.org, go into Epidemic Sound. And they've actually always doing a free trial, 30 days free trial. I've got a link in my description where it's a referral link, so if you click on that, I actually get sort of a month free of Epidemic Sound. But yeah, if you did use that link and ended up being a member of Epidemic Sound, that would help me. If not, yeah, like I say, just go on Epidemic Sound, get yourself a free trial and give them a go. All right, so with that being said, I just want to give you some tips when it comes to actually doing your sound design. These tips are not necessarily in any kind of order or of importance or anything like that. It's just what I've been thinking of on the top of my head and written down. So the first one is to make sure you fade your sounds in so that they're not too jarring. So if I just show you over here on the timeline, so if you just go onto one of your sound effects, for example this one here, and you go towards the end of it, all you have to do is just, if I delete that, just right click, apply default transition, and immediately you'll have this kind of fade into the next sound effect. Again, I've got it sort of spread all over my timeline here. As you can see, I'm constantly fading in and out of the sound effects. Another thing that you can do if you didn't want to do a crossfade like that is to actually just go in and add keyframes. So add one keyframe there up here in the top left and go down towards the end with the sound selected. Add another keyframe, and you can actually just sort of slowly have it fade out that way as well. But I found that the crossfade works pretty well most of the time, unless I want to do like a long fade over a long period of time, then I will use this keyframe method. Otherwise, if it's just a quick fade into the next sound, then I'll just use the crossfade. So yeah, I'm quite frequently using that just to make sure that I listen and that the sounds are not too abrupt and jarring, like when you go from one sound to the other. Make sure they slowly fade into the next one, because that's very subtle, but it's really annoying when you can just sort of distinguish, okay, there's a sound, there's a sound, there's a sound. So you want to be fading into each sort of sound. So tip number 2 is to do with the speed of the sound effects. So you can actually manipulate the speed of all these sound effects, and they will give you different sounds. So that's really good if you want to kind of make the most of like all the sound effects that you do download, because going from 100% to 50% can dramatically impact the sound. So you do want to play around with sound sometimes. If you've got a sound that you think that it probably should work in a certain scenario, but it doesn't for some reason, I quite often just play around with the speed of the actual sound effect. So for example, I've got this sort of whooshy kind of transition that kind of helps to, when you pan the camera, sort of make a little bit of a whoosh sound into the next clip, like that. But this whoosh, I mean, in theory, I guess it should have worked, but if I actually play it at 100% at the actual point of the transition, it was just too whippy, and obviously, like, I could have gone into Epidemic Sound to try and find the exact right whoosh that I needed, like a longer one or a bassier one, but sometimes you don't need to do that. So if I just right clicked it, just go back to how it was before, and yeah, with the fact that I just went into speed and I just reduced it to about 12 on the actual speed, and it just gave a nicer whoosh, like with a bit more bass, and that's all I had to do in that instance. So yeah, that's tip number 2. Just look to see if you can play around with the speed. Another scenario where that can come in handy is if you've got like a slow motion clip, so something that you filmed in slow motion that you want to add sound to, but the sound that you've got from Epidemic Sound or wherever is just for a normal motion clip. If you then go into that and sort of slow it down as you would slow down your clip, it could quite possibly work better with the slow motion clip to have slowed the sound down as well, rather than having it at normal speed. So tip number 3 is to bring in the sound of the next clip before you actually see the visual of the next clip. So for example, here where we see the church, first we're going to hear the sound of the church bells just very slightly before we actually see the church. So just one sort of church bell to give you that feeling of like, okay, you can hear the church, and then you see it. It just gives a nice smooth transition into the next clip. So another example where I did this was where I got this footage of this Filipino gentleman starting up his boat. So you can see just for a split second, half a second, we just hear the boat first, and then we see. So it's very subtle again, but I think it could just with the flow of the video, and again, going back to sort of the point I made in tip number 1 is to just not have the sounds too jarring. So as well as having them fade in, having them come in slightly just before the visuals to use as well, as a nice transition from one clip to the other, because transitions don't have to just be visual. I mean, the sound of a clip starting before you actually see it can be a nice transition to the next one. So I think you get the point on that one, but yeah, that's a really important one and something that I'm trying to work on even more when I do my sound design. So again, when it comes to sort of improving sound design and the steps that I've taken to do that over the years, this tip that I'm going to give you here is one of those things. So basically, I used to just sort of lay down, sound, the next sound, the next sound, the next sound, which is, and it just used to be one layer really, just of sound. So start with that first sound of this, then the next sound, and the next clip, and the next sound. But I think if you really want to sort of take it to the next level and again improve the sound design overall and have that more immersive feeling of the viewer has when they watch your video, then it becomes more apparent that you need to actually be layering your sounds, so having more than one sound. So for example, here I've got a few sounds that are layered up on top of each other. So there's the kids over here playing by the beach, and that's actually in-camera sound that was recorded in camera. And along with that, I haven't just got that, I've got still the sound of the guy who started up his boat in the clip previous. That's still going off in the background to signify that this is all in one kind of area and one kind of scene, which it actually was. So he's there, and I've left that running in the background, but kind of fading out sort of here. I've also got sound of like bird ambience to give that kind of early morning feel, along with the kids playing over here by the beach. So it's just all a few sounds laid up on top of each other, and I think it just helps again with that sort of immersive feeling, rather than just having one sound, then one sound, then one sound, which is what I used to do. So here's another example where I've got a few sounds. I've got the sort of forest jungle sound going off in the background, as well as some sounds of monkeys, which it's not really relevant because there wasn't any monkeys there, but I felt it just kind of felt okay to do that, felt right. It didn't feel like that jarring. So just having those sort of two sounds together. So the background jungle sound with the monkeys for the environment that she's in, I think it worked. And that sort of leads me on to tip number 5, which is actually thinking outside the box when it comes to sounds, because sometimes you're not going to find the exact sound that you need or the exact sound that you want within a sound effects library. And you might not have the ability to record that sound for whatever reason. So like, for example, I knew that for this sort of coconut being open from the center, because I got it in slow motion, I knew that I wanted it to have some sort of sound there, but the sound that was actually recorded was pretty much nothing. It didn't really make a sound, but as the visual shows, you know, that sort of coconut, you know, fresh coconut water coming out, it just felt like it should have a sound there. But if you sort of look for coconut opening sounds and stuff like that, it doesn't really reflect what you're looking at there. So again, this is where you can think outside the box, and I actually found the sound of orange squishing, which I think works. So if you listen to it, kind of like a little and a bit of a disgusting sound, but I think it kind of works, and it's nothing to do with a coconut being cut into. So yeah, again, that's where you can think outside the box. And so the final tip that I want to give you is in relation to the volume of the actual sounds that you have. So you don't want them to be too overpowering, too in your face. Make sure that they are in relevance to where the actual camera is. So if the camera is quite far away to the sound source, then you don't want the sound to be too loud or too overpowering. Whereas obviously if the camera is very close to the source of the sound, yeah, you can have that sort of volume level being taken up a level. An example of this is where I've got a few shots of this waterfall, starting off with this one here. In relation to where the actual camera is, it's not going to be that loud. So then coming into the next clip where we are a bit closer in, it makes sense to have the volume a little bit louder because you're actually quite close to the source of the sound itself. So yeah, that's some basic advice and tips I can give you on sound design. Again, I am not by no means an expert on this at all. I'm really trying to develop my sort of sound design game overall, and I'm really enjoying it actually. I'm really enjoying actually going out, and instead of just thinking about, oh, okay, I'm filming this and this, I'm actually thinking more about the sound of it as well, and how even when it comes to transitions, how you can even transition things in from sounds rather than, you know, just concentrating on your visuals only. So it is quite a cool, new, refreshing thing that I'm trying to build into my videos, and I encourage you guys to do it as well if you're not already. So yeah, that's all I've got for you today. If you did find the video useful, then please do consider giving it a like, because that would help me out a lot. Also consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more stuff like this in the future. And yeah, that's all I have for you today. I hope you have a wicked day, and I'll see you in the next video.